USA Patriot Act Improvement and Reauthorization Act of 2005. Political feasibility of selected provisions. Issue emergence. Following the terrorist attacks against the United States on September 11, 2001, Congress created and passed the USA Patriot Act, which granted significantly expanded authorities to the executive branch to conduct surveillance on American citizens. The original bill passed with overwhelming support in both houses. The bill was passed with 16 sunset provisions, which required Congress to reauthorize the bill in 2005 in order to allow the provisions to remain in place. Almost immediately, debates developed about the surveillance provisions of the Patriot Act and their impact on the civil liberties of Americans. What are we analyzing? The debates surrounding reauthorization of the Patriot Act in 2005. All but 2 of the 16 provisions were reauthorized without further sunsets, making them permanent law. The debate surrounding reauthorization was fierce, and opponents to reauthorization were well organized and vocal. How did so much of the bill become permanent? How did modifications to the existing law make this possible? Key issues in the debate. Legislative oversight. How Congress could supervise the execution of searches by the federal government. Judicial oversight. What role the courts would play in regulating the issuance of searches, and what power they had to restrain unreasonable search. Utilization of gag rules in the issue of warrants or search. Rules established by the Patriot Act that prevented subjects of searches from discussing the search with anyone, including legal counsel. These are the 3 main facets of the debate that are explored in my project. Key interest groups. ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, is the most vocal and important interest group opposing the powers created by the Patriot Act. Key goals for them are the reform of legislative and judicial oversight. They view the provisions of the Patriot Act as dangerous overreach by the executive branch. Executive branch authorities, primarily focused on achieving reauthorization of the Patriot Act in its 2001 form and removing sunset provisions from the law. Key members representing the executive branch were Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and FBI Director Robert Mueller, both who appeared before Congress on multiple occasions. They believed that the threat from terrorism was so extreme that the risk of harming civil liberties was justified to keep Americans safe. There were several other prominent groups in the debate, but these were by far the most important. Analysis. The ACLU and associated groups had a direct influence on the final composition of the bill. The key tool that they used was the SAFE Act of 2005, which the ACLU supported, and a lot of the rhetoric that's apparent in the bill is also apparent in other ACLU literature. While the bill never made it to a vote, it created a compromise space by which civil liberties groups and members of Congress could express an alternative to the wholesale reauthorization of the Patriot Act in its 2001 form. None of the provisions of the SAFE Act made it into the 2005 Patriot Act reauthorization, but their influence is clear, and combined with pressure from Congress and other outside groups in the debate, it created a moderating effect on the goals of the executive branch to reauthorize without changes. The final law saw modifications to provisions of the bill in line with what the ACLU proposed, and as stated previously, 14 of the 16 provisions became permanent law. Here we see my policy map. On the left, we see the policy provisions of the White House, which wanted no changes to the selected provisions in the reauthorization. You'll see on the left in red and pink. On the right, you see the policy position of the ACLU in blue. The pink on the right, closest to the blue column, represents a range of acceptable compromise for the ACLU. The purple shows where the range of acceptable policy provisions overlaps for both sides. The purple fields became part of the reauthorization. In general, judicial oversight more closely resembled the proposals of opponents than what the White House proposed. Legislative oversight was also more closely aligned to what the ACLU proposed. Gag rules were modified to allow subjects of the orders to seek counsel and challenge the gag order, representing a position that's closer to what the ACLU proposed than what the White House proposed. Conclusion. The reauthorization of the Patriot Act moderated the excesses of the executive authority in the selected provisions that particularly concern the ACLU. But the effect of the moderation was muted in comparison to the policy provisions they initially suggested and what was proposed in the 2005 SAFE Act. The threat of another terrorist attack and the effect of already having legislation in effect limited the impact that dissent could have on modifying the law. The ACLU won provisions that strengthened oversight, but the fundamental powers that the executive branch gained remained unaltered and have only continued to grow.